Yee, and this is so exciting for me, for real. Amy DuBois Barnett is here with me. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And her book, If I Ruled the World, is actually out today, so I'm excited for that. And I read the whole book, and when I tell you, this is a absolutely cannot put it down book. And I also have admired your career for such a long time, and I just have to say, for me coming up, Honey Magazine was it, like for me and all my friends. And so it feels like this book, If I Ruled the World, I know it's a work of fiction, but I know you have the inside information on what it's like to run a magazine. And I'm sure you were able to pull from different aspects of your life as a journalist, as an editor-in-chief, And so I just want to say I was so excited when you told me you were writing this book. You asked me to host your book launch event that's going to be in Brooklyn, and no questions asked. I was like, absolutely. So,
which I totally appreciate. And we've been knowing each other for such a long time. And yes, you're right. If I Ruled the World is not a roman clay. It's not my personal story, but it's based in a world that I know better than almost anyone. And it is definitely inspired by my experience as an editor-in-chief and specifically of Honey Magazine.
So even how you start this book.
I know. I start out with a bang.
Right into the action.
It's juicy, y'all. It's some controversy in there. That is correct.
And I want to talk about just some of the characters because when people read this book, and I remember being struck by the fact that, and not giving away too much, because obviously you need to read it to understand it, but this is in the very beginning. You get caught at a cafe with Alonzo, who is actually your boss.
My protagonist does, yes.
Yes. And it's just so important for me to bring this up because there are so many times when people will try to block your progress and your career.
Right.
And I think in particular as a woman, based off of what you will and won't do with them and for them.
Right, exactly. Well, my book is about that in large part, right? So, my novel is set in New York City in the late 1990s, early 2000s.
What a time.
Oh my God, right? At the intersection of hip hop and magazines and fashion, you know what I mean? And so that's one of the most important cultural eras of our time. And so this book is really a behind the scenes peek into what it was like, especially for a woman, right? So we follow Nikki Rose, my protagonist, as she, she doesn't come of age, right? Because she's an adult when we meet her, she's 29, but she's coming of power inside of these influential institutions where, glamour and, romance and friendship, they coexist with misogyny and racism and danger, right? Because it's such a dangerous time to be a woman. And so, Nikki Rose, as you see from the very first page of the book, she's trying to decide who she's willing to become and what she's willing to sacrifice as she goes for her dreams.
And I think sometimes we also don't identify when we've been taken advantage of, because people will say, you made a conscious decision to do this.
Right.
And even though Nikki Rose was an adult, she was, when you start with the book, you'll see Alonzo is the protagonist, like you said.
He's the antagonist.
Antagonist.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the protagonist.
Exactly.
But he's the one that is trying to block her blessings and block her hard work from happening and spreading rumors about her in the industry.
Yes.
But at the same time, I see people acting like, well, she made a decision. Well, she decided to sleep with him, but he was in a position of power over her.
Right, exactly. But that is part of what's fascinating about Nikki's journey, right? She's messy and she's making mistakes, and yes, she's also subjected to power dynamics that make it difficult for her to see clearly and to make the right decisions. But she's also trying to figure out, she's coming into her own voice, right? So she's trying to get empowered enough to make the decisions that are going to be positive for her in the long run. And so we watch her make these mistakes, but we root for her. We root for her to kind of get through it because, she is, driven by purpose. And she does want to, be a positive representation. And she does want to find true love. And she does want to be successful, but she's just, in these difficult situations along the way.
It's interesting because one thing about you that is definitely true about Nikki also is she's mixed. She's biracial.
Yes.
And that sometimes does present like identity issues for people around you to figure out who are you. Because I know when I first started doing radio, having a name like Angela Yee, before people had a chance to see what I look like, it was always like, who is this Asian person invading, our space? And she's not Black until somebody was on the message. It was when they had message boards and somebody was on there like, no, she's actually Black. Right. But then people will tell you, well, you're biracial, you're not Black. How do you identify? You've even done articles about what are you?
Right.
And
Right,
so
right.
how do you think that played in this world, like you said, the set back then, where it's also about credibility?
That's exactly right. I mean, and that is something that I did pull from my own personal experience, although I didn't have quite the journey that Nikki, my protagonist, did in that space. But, I'm a Black woman with a white dad, right? She's also a Black woman with a white dad. That's how she identifies, you know what I mean? But when we first meet her, she is an editor at a high-end, mainstream, read white, fashion magazine. And so, they're asking her to be like the Black whisperer there, like the Black token, whatever. But still her white fashion magazine colleagues think she's too Black, right? And then she goes on to become editor-in-chief of Sugar magazine, which is a urban, Black woman's like music and lifestyle magazine. And when she gets there, people are like, oh, wait a minute, can you authentically represent this brand? Do you have enough cred to be able to do it? Like, who are you really? Are you really Black enough, basically? Are you Black enough, right, to be editor-in-chief of this Black brand? And it's not what I really want to do was represent, being biracial in a more nuanced way. Not like, oh, am I white or am I Black? Because that's not at all her journey. It's more how she is, kind of representing herself in these various spaces and how people are looking at her and what they're expecting of her.
Yeah, she's always Black. Like, she's
Right.
never questioned what she was, but it's other people sometimes that will question that. And one of the things that really stood out was, Black girls don't sell magazines, because when she's working at the white magazine, she's always pushing these Black stories. And, that is something that is definitely, I think, so true today.
Oh, my God.
I mean, I literally know somebody who was working at a very white publication, and she would pitch Black story, and they would be like, no, like, our readers, aren't into that. And she was like the only Black girl. But anytime there was like a big celebrity Black story, they wanted her to be like, oh, can you work on this story?
Exactly.
But anytime she was trying to pitch something that was innovative, that was creative, that was like, okay, they're like, no, that's not for our readers.
That's exactly and
again, that's still today.
That's
in
still
2026.
today. I know. I mean, obviously, racism in this country and around the world will never die.
If you didn't know.
If y'all didn't know.
Turn the news
we
on.
Still racist out here in these streets. But yes, I mean, there are, again, this is not my personal journey, like the journey of my protagonist, but there were certain things from my own life that I did pull in and I appropriated for the novel. And one of the things was that Black Girls Don't Sell magazine line, because that was actually said to me. It was by a man when I was working for a white fashion magazine, not Harper's Bazaar that I worked at later in my career, although there is a story in my book from that as well, which I'll tell you about.
Okay.
But I'll tell you about that one. But this is a man who did, when I was working at a fashion magazine very early in, when I was in my 20s, and he was like, I was pitching a story about Black folks, and he was like, oh, Black girls don't sell magazines. And it is so sad that still happens to us to this day.
Even like in media, they'll be like, Black people don't sell movies, or that can't be international.
But they still want our audience. They still want our dollars.
And still, you can still go to the club with a bunch of white people and they're listening to hip hop. So that's all very interesting. And I think still today we can see a lot of what was happening then is still happening now.
Exactly right.
As I'm looking at this. And also just the power dynamics. Now, I feel like the music industry has had this, like, as we can see, with a lot of people who have been brought to some type of justice, or at least even platform, because there's people who definitely have gotten away with things, people who have managed to avoid, like, any type of punishment. And some people will tell you, oh, well, everybody just behaved badly back then. What do you say to somebody that would say that to you? Like, well, it was just a time period. That's just how everybody acted.
I mean, on one hand, that's true. On one hand, that's true. Like, so many of us dealt with, so much misogyny, sexual harassment, sexual violence, just being dismissed as a woman. All the things. And it's true. It was so integral into the culture, right? That we didn't even really understand at the time. We didn't have the perspective to know how wrong it was. And even if we did, we had no recourse. We had nowhere to go. Who was
you
gonna
still want to work,
us?
right? Like you want to be able to have a job, because that was always the issue too. Like, will I ever work again? Right,
exactly. But also it was thread throughout the culture. It wasn't just a few bad players. It was in the music, right? When gangsta rap kind of, I don't want to say took over, but, gained so much popularity, there was a lot more misogyny than thread throughout much of the lyrics in hip hop. And now there's a ton of, I love hip hop, so there's a ton of beautiful, empowering lyrics, and it's a beautiful art form. So I'm not trying to, denigrate it at all. But there was so much more misogyny that all of a sudden came into the lyrics, and then that became something that was like pedestalized. It was like, a goal almost, by not just the artist, but then the music executives, and then it became part of the culture, and then we exported that culture around the world. And so it's not just, okay, we're going to take down like Puff, we're going to take down this person. It's like, how do you address something that has now become a large part, I should say, of a culture.
I just want to, from your perspective, since you just said Puff's name, when you think about his whole situation, when you look at like a Russell Simmons, for people who are like, well, why didn't somebody do something? Well, why didn't somebody speak out at the time? And I just want to know from your perspective as somebody who was in it, who's witnessed a lot, and not saying that anything happened to you, but what would you say if somebody was like, well, why didn't people speak up? Well, why are they speaking up now? Well, why do people have things to say now? How would you respond to that?
I mean, well, first of all, I could not be more grateful to be sort of like where I was in culture at that time. I was a part of culture. I was creating culture, but I wasn't in, his inside circle in that particular way. But I was just far enough out to like not have, witnessed anything personally, right? But in it enough to have observed other people, who were dealing with not just from him, but all manner of, sexual harassment and violence and all the things. And again, there was many things at play. One of them was power dynamics, right? I mean, many ambitious women, right, were navigating this culture in which misogyny was rampant. And so they felt like they didn't have a lot of alternatives because they wanted to work. They wanted to be successful, right? And also there was a complexity there, right? In that you knew that even you wanted to kind of toe a line, right? That even as your brilliance was valued, so was your beauty, and so it was helpful to be attractive, to be seen as attractive, and then to come in with your intelligence. And so there was a kind of a nuance there. There was a complexity. But really, at the end of the day, where are we going to go? Who are we going to talk to?
Right.
I mean, HR was not.
We see in the book.
Yeah, exactly.
HR is not going to save you.
HR is not going to save you, right? So there was just nowhere to go to actually complain in a way that was going to be effective.
Do you think that to be a successful woman, and I want to ask you, not just the book, but for you personally, a lot of times we do make sacrifices in our personal life, and we see that kind of come into play. I want to ask for Amy, do you feel like in order to achieve what you have, I mean, editor-in-chief of Ebony, editor-in-chief of Honey Magazine, deputy editor at Harper's Bazaar, you also, and I'm going to ask you about your time at Undefeated as well, ESPN, because at the time, they had Jason Whitlock as the person that they had initially put in charge of that. You've been through a lot, but I just want to know. I know, sorry. I just got to run down the accolades
all right.
Yes, so many. But I just want to know, what do you think about that balance? Is it possible for you to have been able to have like a normal functioning relationship outside of work when you're really pulling in these long, like 12-hour, 18-hour days?
I have always functioned best when I'm firing on all cylinders, right? So I actually do better when I'm in a relationship. I do better when I have friendships. I mean, it's partially that I'm a work hard, play hard girl. I've always worked my ass off. I just have. People look at folks in quote unquote glamorous industries, and they think that it's just like, oh, you're just glamorous 24/7, 365. Meanwhile, I was like eating dinner from the vending machine the night before, like midnight. You know what I mean? So that's real. But I have never wanted to sacrifice my life, in service of my job. I've always been really intentional about living life fully. So I've been married, I've been divorced, I have a son, he's in college right now. I'm engaged again to an amazing guy that I've been with for almost 10 years. You know what I mean?
I saw the 2016 throwback. Okay?
You know what I'm saying? I was like, listen, that was the year of years. That's when I met my guy. So I mean, I'm not going to say that there are not sacrifices, because I've made a ton. And honestly, probably the biggest sacrifice is peace. This kind of life is not for everyone. It is not the most peaceful life. It is a life that is filled with a lot of energy and a lot of doing and a lot of sort of people and things and motion and movement. You know what I mean? But there isn't a lot of sort of like sitting back and you have to be intentional about that.
Right.
You know, or you have to be intentional about doing that on vacation or really taking time off to find that peace and find that break. You know, but yeah, I mean, it is very complex to be an ambitious woman.
Right.
Yes.
But I love the fact that she did have it all. Now, there were times this protagonist in the book, Nikki, I was like, girl, what are you doing? Because there's certain decisions, but that's real life, right? Like, I know there's times that no matter what, don't touch that stove, it's hot. And you're still going to be like, are you sure it's hot? I don't look like it's on. So there were just some frustrating things, but there was some news that broke before we even had this interview, and that was in Variety. I saw that Hulu is adapting this into a series.
I am so thrilled.
So I need to ask how all this came about. And of course, you have the amazing Lee Daniels working on the pilot with you too, writing as well. So talk to me about that, because we got to, if it's not enough, everything that you've accomplished, this is just another notch in your belt.
I appreciate you, Sess. I mean, it's, you know, when I was writing this book, I could see every scene playing out in front of me. Like,
Absolutely.
I could really see it cinematically. And I honestly, I manifested. I was like, you know what? I see this on screen, and I see it as a TV show more than a movie. I just see it. And, you know, it was sort of amazing how it came about. My book, you know, a book scout found it and gave it to a really powerful Hollywood executive, who then gave it to Lee Daniels, and they both read the book and they loved it. And then they both came on, you know, to kind of, you know, produce with me, and then we pitched it, and we sold it, you know, in the room, you know, to 28th and then to Hulu. And so now I'm in development on the TV adaptation of If I Ruled the World with Lee Daniels at Hulu. So
that's major.
I mean, it's really exciting.
I know you like champagne. I feel like we need something.
You know what I mean? You know I like champagne. Exactly. You know I like champagne.
But no, congratulations. You know how amazing that is? And you know how much people are going to love to see, when I'm telling you, like, anybody who's going to read this book is going to be like, I cannot put this down. But there's so many lessons I feel like to be learned in it also.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a page turner, but it's also, but I wrote it very intentionally. Like, I wanted it to be juicy. I wanted it to be like a fun escapist page turner, but I also wanted to address some really serious issues that are important to me.
Yeah. You know, I just want to ask about advice that you've gotten, because Black girls don't sell magazines. That was one of it. What are some things that people have told you in your career that you're like, I can't believe somebody actually gave me that advice?
I mean,
so many things.
So many things. I mean, it's just more like this. I mean, it's less about the advice for me, you know, because honestly, like, I have not, I mean, there's a lot of advice that I've listened to, but the sort of, you know, racial microaggressive advice I have, you know, kind of taken a pass on. But I've heard some crazy stuff.
Yeah,
and I will
me
tell
too.
you the second incident that I pulled from real life and put into the book. I won't name names at Harper's Bazaar, you know, the staff, but, you know, I'll tell you the story briefly. You know, when I was at Harper's, I was deputy editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, and I was running a meeting where we were talking about features and stories, you know, kind of upcoming. And so I've kind of pitched, y'all pitch, you know, you work on the ideas together. And I pitched the story about Alicia Keys. Right? Alicia had an album coming out. I can't remember which one.
Oh.
And
I knew it was Alicia Keys when I read it in the book. I said
but that's
to
not
myself,
her, though. She's not.
oh, that's not who it was kind of based on?
Nope,
Okay.
not at all. Not at all. It really
Although
is
she's
not.
still alive.
Yeah, no, but it's not. It's not at all based on her.
Okay.
It really isn't based on her at all.
Okay.
But that particular incident was just, she just happened to be the artist I was talking about.
I thought about that when in the book it was a new artist that was coming out. Her album was supposed to drop.
That's another artist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. So this, you know.
Okay.
So no, I promise you, like, these are not composites of people. Like, these are like really fiction. But the incident that happened at Harper's Bazaar, I was like, okay, well, Alicia Keys has an album coming out. We could shoot her in a, I don't know, whatever I said, black and white jazz bar, whatever I said. And the person on the Harper's Bazaar staff at the time, and I'm the only Black person in the room, needless to say. I think I might have been the only brunette. Like, it was so white. So anyway, so she looks at me, she goes, ugh. And we were working for the editor-in-chief at the time, was sort of notorious, like, you know, Glenda Bailey. She was, you know, I learned a lot from her, but she was a very difficult woman. But she was like, oh my God, I can't, you know, listen, Alicia Keys is so boring. I mean, the only way I could see Glenda, you know, the editor-in-chief, you know, greenlighting the story is if Alicia agreed to be photographed in whiteface or something.
Whoa.
And then she looks at me and she was like, oh, excuse me. Sorry, Amy. And so that actually happened to me in real life when I was working at Harper's Bazaar.
Wow.
And I put that into my novel.
I saw it, yeah, the white face.
Yes.
That is a wild.
It was wild.
Thing. And then there's no repercussions for somebody saying something.
There was no repercussions. In fact, this woman whose name I will not give you went on to be quite successful, and many Black folks I know are fans of hers.
It's interesting, not like I was having a conversation with she probably wouldn't mind me saying her name, but I won't, with one of my friends, and she recently got scammed by somebody, and this person is still like out here doing things, and she really wants to like put it out there, but she's also like, I don't know if I want to. She's like, I don't want other people to have to deal with what I had to go through with what this person did to me, but at the same time, it also feels like we kind of like in a way protect people that we shouldn't. If that makes sense.
I mean, for me, it's not about protecting this woman. It's just, I have calculus on these things in my head. And I'm always like, what's the win? You know what I mean? Like, actually, what's the win here? And, it just never struck me as being, and I'm also not messy. I don't, I mean, imagine, Angela, if you will, all the stories I have over all the years.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not a messy person. You don't see me out here like this person, that person, this, the third. I don't, right? And I was like, you know what? There's no win for me, and there's no point in bringing her up to folks.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like there's so many times that like terrible things have happened to me, and I really don't address it. Like, and it's a hard kind of way to navigate through things because sometimes you address things and they become bigger and then it becomes this whole big thing, and mentally it's like, why did I even do that? I don't feel like dealing with it.
Right.
When things go away faster, I guess kind of when you don't.
Exactly. And I don't want to talk about it a lot too. It's like, something was like, it felt good to write about in the novel. It was sort of cathartic.
Listen,
you know what I mean? I was like,
she knows who she is.
Exactly.
And the people in that room know who she is.
That's all I'm trying to say. You know who you are.
All right. Now I want to talk about ESPN, The Undefeated. I just have to know, just because at the time when you were, what was your position there that you were kind of like leading?
So I was the managing editor of The Undefeated. Yes, that's true. And yes.
But before things kind of kicked off, Jason Whitlock was the person that they kind of had chosen to be and I can't even imagine what that must have been like. So I just want to know, how did that work out? Like, I know he wasn't there for long, right? But what happened there?
Again, I'm not messy. You know what I mean? I've never spoken about this publicly. It was a horrible experience. It was a horrible experience, on every level, every imaginable level. I don't want to get into specifics because again, I just don't want to, but what you see of him on social media, he is worse in person. He is worse to deal with, because just imagine all of that. And then there's a really strong bully overlay to it. You know what I mean? A sense of entitlement and a sense of, kind of self-aggrandizement, So it was a terrible experience, bottom line.
All right, let's move on to a good experience.
Yes.
Who would you say was the most amazing artist that you've put on the cover of a magazine? As editor-in-chief of Ebony, as editor-in-chief at Honey.
Oh my gosh.
I just want to know would you say was a delight?
Oh, there's so many. Well, when I was editor-in-chief of Honey magazine, I gave Beyonce her first ever solo magazine cover.
Period. Okay.
And I mean, she is just the kindest, loveliest person. Her whole family is lovely. Miss Tina's lovely. Yvette Noel Sure, her longtime PR rep, is lovely.
Still her rep.
Yeah, still her rep after
games.
all
Okay.
decades now. She's lovely. And so that was just a really good experience. But I put so many people on covers who I deeply admire. I mean, the Obamas. I was fortunate enough to interview, Michelle Obama in the no longer, in the East Wing that no longer exists.
That was an Ebony cover.
That was an Ebony cover. I interviewed, President Obama in the Oval Office.
Wow, that's surreal. That's amazing.
That was incredible. I mean, these are amazing people. And then there's so many artists that I've put on covers that I admire. I mean, everybody from, oh my God, like Jill Scott to Missy Elliott to, Eve. I mean, I just can't even, there's too many at this point to name, but I've been really fortunate to meet some extraordinary individuals over my 20 years in media.
I just like those type of stories. I like to hear like the good, positive stories about how somebody was amazing.
Yes.
Because we always hear the bad ones and those get amplified. But then I know Mary J. Blige.
Oh my God, Mary, honestly, when Mary and I first met, it took a minute for her to warm to me. And she wasn't, this was early in her career.
Which I like. I like when it takes people a little minute.
It took a minute. She wasn't too sure about me in the beginning. She was like, I don't know about you. And then over the years, I've shot her so many times, done so many photo shoots with her. And I mean, we have just really become so cool, But yeah, it's true. It took a minute. And then, she just became one of my most favorite people to work with.
How does it work when somebody's upset about a story? We see this play out in the book, and I won't give away too much, but when they're the subject of an in-depth story, of course, you can't tell them how it's going to come out. They do an interview. It's on the record. Has that happened to you? I feel like in the long career that you've had, that's had to have happened several times. I've heard other people's stories, but how does that work for you?
I mean, of course it happens. And it's terrible because you want people to be, excited, especially if the story is meant to be positive. But and I'll tell you this little brief story too. I mean, little Kim, who we're very cool now. Kim and I are super cool. But, this was also in the Honey days. She threatened my life once in the Honey offices off of a story that I wrote about her, a cover story. And I'll never forget, she came in a looking fly in a head-to-toe pink fur jumpsuit, talking about, how dare you? And I'm like, Kim, girl, we had a tape recorder between us when we were
like
talking.
You said it on the record.
I have the tape, but she was so upset about something I printed, But again, we're cool now. I think at the end of the day, you just want to be a responsible journalist, and you want to make sure that you did get the quote accurately. You do have a backup to it. You have your notes, you have your recordings, you have other people that you've interviewed, your tertiaries, you have everything that backs up what you're putting in the story. So if somebody is upset, you can say credibly, yeah, but A, you said it. B, these other people said you said it. C, this third person saw it. You know what I mean? And so what you gonna do?
I've heard stories from other journalists who have talked about times when people have said things in interviews that perhaps they shouldn't have said. I remember, and Lola, you mentioned Lola, and I love that you use real people who I actually even know.
Right.
I remember Lola telling me a story about an interview that she did, and she was like, why would he say these things and do that? And she used her own discretion to be like, well, maybe I don't want to, even put that in there. How do you, because I've also heard people say you cannot be friends with the subjects of your, articles, of your journalism, because then it becomes like a different type of expectation maybe that they have. Right. How does that play out for you as far as you being in this position where you have to sit down, talk to people, be objective, but sometimes you do maybe have a friendship, or do you believe that you can't be friends with the artists?
I don't exactly believe that, because when I do sit down with somebody, when I offer coverage or when I sit down to interview somebody, I'm very clear. Like, this is journalistic, coverage, right? So it's going to be objective, and this is, an objective story, right? But I'm cool with so many people that I met over the years. I mean, I just am, because, when you spend time with somebody, especially if it's like a cover shoot, back in the magazine days, I mean, you spend a bunch of time leading up to the cover shoot talking about like the creative direction and the looks and the location and all the things. And then you get there and you're in it for like at least a day or two, and I'm a very hands-on person in those environments. And so, you get really cool with people. So I can't say that I'm not, cool, friends with people that I've met over the years, but I'm also, a journalist and have been for a long time. And so I don't sacrifice my journalistic integrity for any kind of friendships.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. My girl, Jasmine Brand, she's always like, listen.
Jasmine.
Yeah. Jasmine's always like, when I first met her, she would not give anybody her phone number. And I've heard other people who own entertainment sites say that, like, because people call you all the time trying to get you to take stories down, which is a little different, because the whole entertainment site era is so different than the magazine era. What do you think about where we are now when it comes to print journalism?
I think a couple of things. I think that the magazine industry is obviously, not anywhere near as influential as it was. So my book, If I Ruled the World, is set in the heyday of magazines, when you really understood the power and influence that they had, when a cover could make or break an artist, or, you know what I mean? And I really wanted people to feel what it was like to be in such an important industry, to be in a high pressure environment, to do something that was so glamorous and yet so, high stakes. But now it doesn't have the same feel to it, of course, because magazines, while still prestigious, have nowhere near the level of importance that they used to have. But I think that there's a return to print now. I think that
Yeah.
people are getting a little sick of all the digital stuff, and they want to go back to some analog things. And I think there's just going to be a sort of a return, but maybe in a more niche way.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think there's nothing like seeing an actual magazine with yourself in it. Kind of like there's nothing like hearing your song on the radio. People can say, "Oh, streaming," and you don't even need that. But when you're listening to the radio and you're like, you cannot tell me a person does not still want to hear their song on the radio, just like a person does not want to see their face on the cover of a magazine with a feature inside.
Exactly. I mean, it's a sexy thing to have, because also there's nothing like a magazine shoot. I mean, you don't really do that in digital now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
People be like, "Do you have pictures you could submit?" Or
Right, exactly. But I mean, but we used to spend, so much time on these covers, and they were, they would be sometimes conceptual. We would have like beautiful high-end, fashion photographers and high-end makeup artists. Like the glam squad would be impeccable, and the sets would be impeccable. We would build them sometimes, and you know what I mean. And so it would be just such an entire production that you don't see in many other.
Quite expensive too.
Yes, very expensive.
And people stealing the clothes. Like, I'm gonna just take these clothes.
That happened to me so many times. I'm like, you
Listen,
cannot have those shoes, lady.
I worked for Wu-Tang, so I already know what it is. They'd be like,
know.
"I'm sorry, all the clothes are gone. We were supposed to return them, but what can I do about it?"
Right.
Now, this book is something that you've worked on and had the concept for while you were at Honey Magazine, right? Is this when you first were like, "I want to do this book"?
I started thinking about it when I was a Honey, and I started writing it when I was at Teen People magazine. So when I was at Teen People, I was actually the first Black woman to run a major mainstream magazine in the country.
Period.
And it got me, thinking about what it was like, as an editor to be in these white spaces and to be in these Black spaces, and the idea started to percolate. And I wrote about 100 pages back then, but I put it aside in part because I didn't have the creative bandwidth for many, many years to finish it, and in part because I don't really think I knew what the story was about. It was like when I first started writing, it was about like, a fun, plucky young lady, trying to become editor-in-chief of a magazine, But then it was only when I picked it back up, like many years later, that I was like, actually, yes, that's generally what the story's about. But it's really about a woman who is contending with like the cost of ambition, who's trying to find her voice and become empowered, who's dealing with misogyny, who's dealing with racism. So it's like, page turner with all this like, sexy glamour, but there's all these like themes that I really wanted to explore. And when I figured that out, the book, kind of took shape for me.
Ooh, how much of that 100 pages you think you used? Did you?
Girl, I rewrote
Because sometimes
all
you
of
go back and
them.
you're like, what was I? I hate, like, when I write stuff, I hate going back to look at it later. And
Well, that's what writing is.
Yeah.
I mean, writing is editing. And I mean, I kept a lot of it, though. I did, but I went back and I rewrote it. Do you know what I mean? So it's still a lot of what I first wrote, but I added a prologue, I added characters, and there probably was like not one single sentence from what I wrote back in the day that I didn't touch in some way when I was rewriting the book.
when you also think about the women that were kind of like, the editor-in-chief Lucinda, who you guys called Lucifer, or Barbara at Sugar Magazine in the book.
Right.
And just how these women seem like, I don't know if they had to be extra hardcore and just that style of like being a boss, kind of you had to be a quote-unquote bitch, just as,
I mean,
in order for people to respect you. Do you think that is something that's changed?
I mean, I know it changed for me because I was never like that. I mean, I'm a, not for nothing, I'm a 3-time editor-in-chief of national magazines, and then I went on to run, digital, brands for BET, the Griot, Entertainment Studios. I mean, and I don't lead that way. You know what I mean? I have very high expectations of everybody I work with, but I also believe in bringing people up, right? And making sure they have the tools and the information to be successful, to being invested in the success of the people that you work with. And that is very different from some of these characters that I wrote about. I mean, and Lucinda, I mean, she was the editor-in-chief of that, kind of high-end mainstream magazine. And she definitely was not based on Glenda Bailey at all. Glenda is a very, very different kind of human being. But that sort of unyielding, unforgiving sort of sense that, in order to be the best, you had to sort of like wring it out of people. I mean, that is something that a lot of women kind of felt that they had to do when they reached the top. And I think for Barbara, the other character who runs New Voices Media, which is the parent company of Sugar Magazine, she is a woman operating in a man's world. She's the CEO of this company. And she is just like trying to be successful. She just, she's an interesting character because, she's on one hand kind of an antagonist. On the other hand, she wants Nikki to succeed.
Right. She gave her the opportunity.
She wants my protagonist to succeed, but she needs her to think about the bottom line and be successful financially. And if she can't do that, then that's a problem.
Well, I just want to say you're going on tour. Obviously, we're kicking it off in Brooklyn at Greenlight Bookstore, which I'm so honored. You're also going to be with your fiance on one of your stops, right?
Yes, I am. I'm so excited. So,
how was he during this process?
Oh, girl, I'm so grateful for my man. I have to tell you.
My man.
I mean, he was like so supportive because I was probably like this side of intolerable. Like I was just like, can you bring me tea? I like completely like just so focused on everything for the past 3 years. I mean, this is, again, people look at, folks in sort of glamorous, industries and what have you. And I don't think it's hard to describe the work that goes into, making some of this stuff happen. Richard Brooks is my fiance. He's an actor. And he is from Cleveland.
Shout out to Reasonable Doubt. I love that show. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Exactly. Shout out to Reasonable Doubt, Being Mary Jane. He was on the original cast of Law and Order. But, he is from Cleveland. And so he's actually going to be my conversation partner for my event in Cleveland. It's like, homegrown actor, like coming on home, and me. Author,
I like that. I think that's so cute.
I know. It's so cute. I'm super excited to see him on tour, too.
Yeah. Well, I love that for you. And I love this space that you're in. I know you went to Brown University, then you got your MFA at Columbia University. This is kind of what you've been wanting to do. Clearly, it's something that's been on your heart for such a long time.
Yes.
Because you had, like I said, conceived of it back in the Honey days, the Teen People days, and now it's here.
I know. I can't
How do you feel?
Oh my gosh, I feel so proud. I mean, it's true. I got an MFA, a Master's in Fine Arts, from Columbia when I was in my 20s. And I thought that I was going to spend my life writing novels. And then I, needed to eat and have shelter. And so I got a job. I was like, I can't just do this. I need to actually have a paycheck. And I started on this career in media that I'm super proud of, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. As you should be.
I've always been such a fan of yours.
I appreciate you, sis. I mean, just the opportunity to represent communities that I care about and tell our stories has been the joy and honor of my life. And now to be able to do it in a different way, right? In a way that represents my original dream of creative writing, but to tell our stories through my creative writing. I mean, it's indescribable. I'm oh my God, you're gonna make me cry. I'm proud, and I'm also excited for this story, this book that I put so much heart into, to get out there in the world.
And the timing is great because the fact that it's already, going to be, we're waiting for this being developed to series on Hulu. That's a huge situation. Now, look, I can't let you get out of here without some journalistic questions about what's going on in the world today.
All right. All right.
So Kanye West, yesterday we talked about this open letter in the Wall Street Journal that he wrote, and he is saying that he's not expecting people to forgive him, but he wants to earn people's forgiveness. And he talks about his bipolar disorder, what he's been going through, his accident that he had 25 years ago. So what are your thoughts about what Kanye West, the path that he's on, and what do you think?
Girl. So,
because I posted it and my comments are in shambles.
I mean, I will bring some of it back to my personal experience, right? My amazing 19-year-old son, who is a music producer and is in the second year of the music program at Drexel University. He has type 1 diabetes, and he also had very dramatic double jaw surgery a couple of summers ago. That was extreme trauma. And I noticed in Kanye's letter that he referenced both type 1 diabetes and he referenced, his jaw surgery. And he used that as an excuse for his rampant anti-Semitism, his betrayal of the Black community, his alignment, with systems and institutions and people who would want to take us down. And I'm sorry, I just don't believe that, espousing those kinds of values and those kinds of views is stems from the things that he's saying that he has and the experiences that he's had in life. It's like people who are, who are drunk, right? And they're like, oh, I called you the N-word because I was drunk. No.
Right.
You
Why
didn't
would
call
that
me the
even-
N-word because you're drunk. You call me the N-word because that's how you feel. And, the alcohol, sort of, decreased your ability to filter yourself. So, no, I don't forgive him, and I never will.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Now, next up, Tyra Banks. We saw that Netflix is doing a series on America's Next Top Model. And she's going to be speaking out and kind of like going back in time to what that period was like. What did you think about America's Next Top Model? Because I know I do want to watch this series to see what's happening, but that was also a really harsh time period, like we talked about earlier.
It was tough. I mean, there's been so many clips that have resurfaced.
They're so wild.
They're so wild that you look back on, you're like, I forgot that actually
In
really
the trailer,
happened.
they're like, we're going to be a different ethnicity,
I know, but you know what? I mean, it was a reality show. I mean, I think people forget that it was a reality show. And, I think that she was playing a character. And, in these reality shows, you have to have a lot of extremes in order for them to be popular, So, I mean, I do think that a lot of, the clips that you're seeing that are resurfacing and a lot of things that were said on the show were in service of this kind of reality show need that, producers are telling you, okay, yeah, you got to make it more dramatic. You got to be more extreme. You got to be more crazy. And so, I think I'm hoping that that's what she's going to talk about, because I can only imagine the pressure that she was under.
Right.
Trying to make a show successful. And it was so incredibly successful and keeping it successful all those years.
Now, lastly, I want to ask you about everything that's going on with the current administration. And so we see some artists that are actually doing performances for Donald Trump, and people are upset about it. Okay, now I want to get your thoughts on, people having different...
You see my face, right?
Yeah,
You're looking at my face like, go on, ask me.
Yeah, so I just want to know what you think about some of these artists and some of them and their alignment with Donald Trump and, saying that they support him and what he's doing and really kind of not taking the impact that this could have seriously.
I do miss the days when we could have civil political disagreements, in a way that didn't devolve into nastiness, right? I do miss those days, and I wish that we were in a period of time where somebody could be a Republican and somebody could be a Democrat and have a civil discourse between them in a way that you felt wouldn't like destroy the very, that was polite, but also wouldn't destroy the very fabric of what this country, I don't want to say was built on because it was built on slavery, but wouldn't destroy, what we envisioned this country to be and what it could be, right? And it's unfortunate because we are now in a bit of an all or nothing kind of a moment in terms of, where we align ourselves and what's going on in the world, and we are within, an administration that, is clearly, espouses violent fascist, ideology. And that violent fascist ideology is, predicated on, desire to control women, a desire to repress the rights of brown people, black and brown people, a desire to kind of economically control this country in a way such that there is a desperate, undereducated, sick, sort of poor kind of underclass that's going to kind of keep this, economy rolling as this.
The rich are getting so much richer. This huge divide.
Right? That's exactly what's happening, right? And so I think that it's unfortunate because there is a lot of intentional ignorance out there, because of the way they're cratering. They have cratered and will continue to crater the educational system. So people don't have access to the right information or don't have the analytical tools, to be able to really see what's happening. If poor people, if black and brown people in this country voted for their own best interests, then we would have such a different looking administration. We would have such a different looking country. But unfortunately, that's not what's happening right now.
I think there's so much misinformation when people were getting ready to vote, just about, the. I remember when he had this quote platinum plan, and people really thought that was like a real plan. It was like, guys, this is not.
It's not real.
Yeah,
and that's, and then I think that, it's unfortunate that, this is also a very sexist country, and, it was a very tall order, I think, unfortunately, to expect that this country at that time, was going to elect a woman of color, against
Right.
Donald
I always
Trump.
say that was
It was a very,
sexism was not going to allow that. We've seen that time and time again.
and it was very unfortunate, and I tried my level best. I wrote articles, I donated, I spoke about, Kamala Harris. I did everything I could, but it was also an extreme uphill battle.
And I think the other hard part, and as we talk about journalism, is that people have so much access. Everybody's an expert, and everybody can put out something, whether or not it's true, and it can reach millions of people, and people can believe it's true, and there's no type of standard for that.
That's exactly right. I mean, everybody's got a megaphone, and there's all these folks out there who are talking about all this stuff that is not, hasn't been journalistically vetted, right? So there's no fact checking, and part of what fascist administrations do is that they undermine the media, right? So they undermine trust in the media, and so there's then no place where people can go that they feel that they can get accurate information.
Yeah, even the media doesn't trust the media because the media is being controlled by what you can and can't say, getting sued by the administration.
Right. Well, the media rolled over. I
Yeah.
mean, the way in which so many legacy media organizations have rolled over to this administration is shameful.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
We talk about politics.
I
Can we
know,
talk about my
sorry.
book?
Okay, I'll get back to your book. I do want to say there's also some sex scenes in there, so just some steamy sex scenes.
Turns out I can write a sex scene. I was like,
a few of them. After you wrote the scenes where you're like, Richard, come here. I need to.
I was like, oh my God. Woo, okay. Who knew?
I was like, okay, it starts off steamy, but it continues throughout. I just want to say that too. Yes. But just congratulations to you. Like I said, it was a book that I absolutely could not put down. I'm so happy that you finally were like, this is the time to do it. And it feels like it is the right time.
Yes.
Things happen in God's timing for a reason. And so just excited to be rolling this out with you. Later today, we'll be in Brooklyn. I know it's going to be an amazing conversation. I feel like it's sold out.
It is sold out.
Okay.
It is sold out. It is sold out. But my book is available for wherever you buy books online, at almost any bookstore you can walk into, whether you want to buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a Black-owned bookstore. My book is out everywhere, and I'm super excited for you guys to read this story.
You are going to love it, and I can't wait to see it on the TV.
Yeah.
All right now. All right, Amy DuBois Barnett, If I Ruled the World, which was not the original title.
It was not the original title. It was originally called Sugar, which is the name of the magazine that my protagonist edits in the book. And I loved the name Sugar, but at the end of the day, I was like, If I Ruled the World, I mean, obviously it's such an iconic song from the era in which the book is set. And then there's also a little If You Know, You Know thing in there where Lauryn Hill, who's obviously on the song, she was the first ever cover subject of Honey magazine, which was my first ever role as editor-in-chief. So if you know, you know.
Period. Okay, I love that. Thank you for the history of Honey. Listen, go to the Schomburg. I feel like they have all the magazines. If you ever have a chance to go, the library has like all the periodicals and everything. Like, if you ever have a chance to go and do that and just look at these covers, and I know you've also been showing people and telling some of the stories behind the covers that you've done.
Yes.
Just follow her. It's a great history lesson. It's a great lesson in culture. And you're just an amazing person. So thank you so much for being here in the midst of a snowstorm.
I appreciate you, sis. I cannot wait for our conversation later.
Okay, love it. It's way up.